Hello and welcome to Blockchain Fundamental Series. In the last lecture, we learned the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain. We also saw what problem the blockchain trying to solve. That is the money related problem, money transfer related problem. In this lecture, we will see how blockchain addresses money transfer problem. So let's take an example. We have four persons in the network: Alice, Bob, Charles, and David. And Alice is trying to move the money in the network. So blockchain addresses this money transfer problem. The first principle that we are going to talk is the concept of open ledger. So we'll write here the very first concept is open ledger. So we'll see this with an example. Let's say that we have a network of four people that actually wants to move money from one person, and let's assume that in the beginning, the very first moment when the network started, Alice is having $100. So in the account of Alice, we'll put the money $100. Now Alice is transferring, let's say, some amount to the Bob. So Bob, let's say Alice has transferred $50. So this transfer will be recorded in the open ledger. So this is the open ledger here. So we will write here Alice to Bob equal to $50. Now in the Bob's account we have $50. Now Bob will transfer the money to Charles, let's say for example $30. So this transaction will again recorded in the open ledger, and we'll write here Bob to Charles $30. Now again, in the Charles account we have $30. So Charles, let's say, try to move or create a transaction to David, and the transaction amount is, let's say, $20. So here in the open ledger it will also get recorded Charles to David $20. So this is the concept of open ledger. It is essentially a chain of transaction, and this is one of the reasons that it is called a blockchain. So here we are not discussing about the block. It is just an open ledger which are connected to each other, and it is open and public to everyone. So what it gives us is that everyone owns the network, can see where the money is and how much money each one has in its pocket. First and second, everyone can decide whether a transaction is valid or not. So this is our first principle. It is open ledger. So whenever transaction happens among the person, each transaction will be recorded in the open ledger. Now let's say, for example, uh, David is having an account $20, and if David tries to move some amount, let's say $50. So here David is trying to attempt to move $50, and everybody can see that the David doesn't have the $50 in his account, and so this transaction is not a valid transaction. So everybody will be discard this transaction, and it will not be recorded in the ledger. Now we can move to the second principle. So the second principle is that distributed ledger. So we'll write here distributed. So whatever the ledger has been created here, this the exact copy of the ledger will be available to each and every person in the network. So the same copy, whatever we have created here, will be available to Alice, Bob, Charles, David, and whoever joins the network, they will also be having the same copy of the network, same copy of the ledger. So this is the second principle, distributed ledger. Now, since we created many copies of the same ledger, it created another problem. Now, when there are various copies of the ledger in the network, we need to make sure that all these copies are synchronized and all the participants in the network see the same copy of the ledger, the same version of the ledger, and this leads to the third principle of blockchain. So the third principle of the blockchain is all copies are synchronized. All copies are synchronized. So this is the third principle. Now we are going to do that using an example. Let's say that Bob wants to move to Charles. Let's say some here. Let's say Bob wants to move to Charles. Let's say $40, and Bob is going to do Bob publish and broadcast these transactions to the network. So the Bob transaction, the Bob $40 attempt to transfer to Charles will be broadcasted to the network. Since this is an unvalidated transaction, it is not going to yet recorded into the ledger. So here in the beginning, we just created a chain of transaction. But what happens in the blockchain, whenever the blockchain is created, first of all, the transaction is unvalidated. It is then picked up by the particular nodes in the network. So here, let's say, for example, the node David is a miner. So the miners will pick up that transaction and the miners will attempt to solve the particular problem. And so Bitcoin miners are special nodes which can hold the ledger. In this case, let's say that David is the miner, are going to compete with other miners. So in a network, there may be multiple miners. For example, let's say another person, Joe, joined the network, and Joe is also the miner. So David will compete with the Joe to solve this particular problem. So whoever first give the solution or validate the transactions will their record will be added to the ledger. So in this way, the miners concept work in the blockchain. We are going to see in detail the miner concept in the upcoming lecture, but for a time being, we will see the three principles here. The first principle is open ledger, second is distributed ledger, and third is all copies are synchronized. So in order to synchronize all the copies in the ledger, the miners are required. So this is all about the how blockchain addresses money transfer problem. If you want to know more about the blockchain or if you want to learn the advanced concept of the blockchain, please refer the Udemy URL given in the description section below. If you found this video interesting, consider getting subscribed. Thank you very much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.